Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands and looked at the broken shield generator in front of him. The machine hummed and sparked, making angry noises that told him it was dying. He had seen enough broken engines in his 32 years to know when something was beyond normal repair. The research station Meridian floated in deep space, far from Earth and far from safety. Jake had been fixing things on the station for 8 months now, ever since the first contact with the aliens went wrong. The Dragon People, as everyone called them, had not been friendly. Their queen had brought her biggest dragon to the peace talks, and it had tried to eat the human diplomats. Now both sides watched each other from a distance, waiting to see who would make the first move. Jake did not care much about politics. He cared about keeping the machines running so people could stay alive in the cold darkness of space. Right now, the shield generator was failing, and that meant trouble. Without shields, the station would be visible to any alien ship that came looking for humans to kill. Dr. Nathan Cross rushed into the engineering bay, his face pale with worry. "Jake, how bad is it?" he asked, staring at the sparking machine. "Pretty bad," Jake said, kneeling down to look at the internal components. "The alien energy signatures are messing with our systems. It's like trying to run a car engine on soup instead of gasoline. The frequencies don't match up. Can you fix it?" Dr. Cross asked. Jake pulled out his tools and started taking apart the access panel. "Maybe, but it's going to take time, and I need to understand what's causing the interference first." Captain Lisa Rodriguez came running into the room, her military uniform crisp despite the emergency. "Report," she said. "The shields are failing," Dr. Cross explained. "The alien energy in this sector is disrupting our technology." "How long do we have?" Captain Rodriguez asked. Jake looked at the readings on his handheld scanner. "Maybe 6 hours before complete failure. After that, we'll be sitting ducks if any dragon ships come by." Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Do what you can. I'll alert the crew to prepare for possible combat." As the captain left, Jake went back to work. He had always been good with machines, even as a kid back on the farming colony where he grew up. While other children played with toys, Jake took apart old tractors and somehow made them run better than before. His teachers said he had a gift for understanding how things worked, but Jake just thought it was common sense. Every machine had a purpose, and if you understood that purpose, you could help it work better. The alien interference patterns showed up on his scanner as jagged lines of energy. Jake stared at them for a long time, frowning. Something about the patterns looked familiar, like a song he had heard before, but could not quite remember. Then it hit him. The patterns looked like the harmonic frequencies from old combustion engines, the kind his grandfather had taught him to repair when he was 12 years old. "That's it," Jake said to himself. He started adjusting the shield generator's internal frequency dampeners, trying to match the alien energy patterns instead of fighting against them. It was like tuning a radio to find the right station. For 3 hours, Jake worked on the machine. Dr. Cross brought him coffee and asked questions, but Jake was too focused to explain much. He could feel the solution just out of reach, like a word on the tip of his tongue. Then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red light. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. "All hands, we have an alien vessel approaching. Prepare for possible boarding." Jake looked at his scanner. The shield generator was completely dead now. Whatever was coming, they would face it without protection. The station shook as something large docked with the main airlock. Jake heard boots running in the corridors and the sound of weapons being prepared. He stayed in the engineering bay, still working on the shield generator. If the aliens wanted to kill everyone, at least he would die trying to fix something. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors, too heavy to be human. Jake heard Dr. Cross gasp and looked up to see something that made his blood freeze. A dragon filled the doorway to the engineering bay. It stood 12 feet tall, with scales that shifted between deep purple and black in the red emergency lighting. Its eyes glowed like yellow fire, and its claws could have torn through steel. Biomechanical parts covered its neck and shoulders, cables and devices that pulsed with alien energy. Behind the dragon came a figure in flowing robes. Queen Zephyra looked like a dragon that had learned to walk on two legs. Her scales were silver and gold, and she wore a crown made of some metal that seemed to bend light around it. Her eyes held the cold intelligence of someone who had ruled through fear for a very long time. "Humans," Queen Zephyra said, her voice carrying the sound of distant thunder. "Your species continues to disappoint me. Your technology is primitive. Your bodies are weak, and your minds are simple. Yet you dare to occupy space that belongs to the draconic hegemony." Dr. Cross backed against the wall, too scared to speak. Jake stood up slowly, his tools still in his hands. He was scared too, but he had work to finish. "This is Korath," Queen Zephyra continued, gesturing to the massive dragon. "He is my enforcer, the destroyer of worlds, the breaker of armies. He has killed more enemies than your entire species has soldiers. When I give the word, he will demonstrate why humans should not venture into our territory." Jake looked at Korath and frowned. The dragon was breathing hard, and his movements seemed slow and painful. The biomechanical devices on his body sparked, occasionally, like Jake's shield generator had done. Something was wrong. "Your dragon looks sick," Jake said. Queen Zephyra's eyes flashed with anger. "You dare to speak of Korath as if he were some common beast? He is a weapon of war, perfected over centuries of service to the hegemony." "Maybe," Jake said, stepping closer to get a better look at the dragon's augmentations. "But his biomechanical systems are malfunctioning. Same problem as our shield generator. A energy interference in this sector is messing with the frequency harmonics." Korath tilted his massive head, looking at Jake with something that might have been curiosity. The dragon's yellow eyes seemed less fierce now, more tired than angry. "You will not touch Korath," Queen Zephyra commanded. "He is bound to me through neural implants and biomechanical integration. No human could possibly understand draconic technology." Jake ignored her and walked over to a control panel near where Korath stood. The dragon did not move to stop him, though his claws could have cut Jake in half without effort. Jake began adjusting the power conduits, reducing the energy interference in the immediate area. As the harsh frequencies faded, Korath's breathing became easier. The sparking in his biomechanical devices stopped, and some of the pain left his ancient eyes. For the first time in weeks, the dragon felt relief from the constant discomfort that had plagued him. Since entering this sector of space, Korath looked down at Jake with what could only be described as gratitude. The human had helped him without being asked, without expecting anything in return. In his long life of conquest and destruction, Korath had never experienced such simple kindness. Queen Zephyra stared in shock as her most feared enforcer sat down calmly next to the human mechanic. "Korath," she said, her voice sharp with command. "Kill the human now." The dragon looked at Jake, then at his queen, then back at Jake. For the first time in centuries, Korath hesitated. The human had helped him when he was in pain. The human had treated him like a living being instead of a weapon. "I said kill him," Queen Zephyra repeated, her voice rising. Korath remained still, watching Jake with thoughtful yellow eyes. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of a decision that would change everything. Queen Zephyra felt something she had not experienced in over 1,000 years. Fear. Not the kind of fear that came from facing a stronger enemy, but the deep, cold fear that came from watching the foundation of her power crack before her eyes. Korath still had not moved to kill the human. The massive dragon sat beside Jake Morrison like a giant metal dog, watching the mechanic work on the nearby control panels. Every few seconds, Korath would tilt his head as Jake explained what he was doing, as if the dragon actually cared about. Human engineering. This is impossible, Queen Zephyra whispered. Her neural control over Korath was absolute. The biomechanical implants in his brain should have forced him to obey her commands without question. She had used this same system to control thousands of dragons across her empire for centuries. Dr. Cross pressed himself against the wall, afraid to move or speak. He had studied alien technology for years, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this moment. A human mechanic was somehow communicating with the most dangerous predator in known space, and the creature seemed to be listening. Jake finished adjusting the power conduits and looked up at Korath. "Feel better now?" he asked. The dragon made a low rumbling sound that might have been agreement. His breathing was steady now, and the painful tension had left his massive frame. Jake nodded and went back to work on the shield generator. "You cannot ignore me forever, Korath," Queen Zephyra said, her voice tight with anger. "I am your queen. You are bound to serve me until death." Korath looked at her with eyes that held a new kind of awareness. For centuries, the neural implants had clouded his thoughts, making him feel like he was watching his own life from a great distance. The human's simple kindness had somehow cut through that fog, showing him possibilities he had forgotten existed. Captain Rodriguez appeared in the doorway with 2 armed guards. She took one look at the scene and raised her hand to stop her soldiers from raising their weapons. "Stand down," she ordered quietly. "Let's see how this plays out." Queen Zephyra turned her attention to the human captain. "Your mechanic has corrupted my enforcer somehow. This is an act of war against the draconic hegemony." "Jake," Captain Rodriguez said carefully, "what exactly are you doing?" Jake looked up from his work. "Fixing things," he said simply. The energy interference was causing problems for their biomechanical systems, same as our shield generator. I adjusted the local power grid to reduce the harmful frequencies. "And this helped the dragon?" Captain Rodriguez asked. "Seems like it," Jake said. He looked at Korath. "How long have you been in pain from those implants?" Korath opened his mouth and made a series of low sounds. To everyone's surprise, the sounds formed words in heavily accented English. "Weeks," he said slowly, as if remembering how to speak. "Pain for many weeks." Dr. Cross nearly fainted. In all their studies of draconic physiology, no one had suspected that the dragons could learn human languages. "You can speak?" he asked. "All dragons can learn languages," Korath said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "We are not animals. We are people like you, but different." Queen Zephyra's face went pale beneath her scales. "Korath, you will stop speaking to these humans immediately. They are beneath you. They are insects to be crushed." "No," Korath said simply. "They are not insects. This one helped me when I was hurting." "You knew I was hurting, and you did nothing." The accusation hit Queen Zephyra like a physical blow. She had indeed known that Korath was suffering from the energy interference, but she had seen it as a minor inconvenience. Dragons were tools to be used, not beings to be cared for. The idea that one of her weapons might have feelings about how it was treated had never occurred to her. Jake finished his work on the shield generator and powered it up. The machine hummed to life, its readings showing stable operation for the first time in days. "There we go," he said with satisfaction. "Should be good for a while now." "How did you do that?" Dr. Cross asked, staring at the working machine. "Same principle as helping Korath," Jake explained. "Instead of fighting against the alien energy patterns, I worked with them. It's like tuning a guitar. You don't force the strings to make the right sound. You adjust them until they want to make the right sound. Captain Rodriguez nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand why Jake had succeeded where trained scientists had failed, while others tried to impose human solutions on alien problems. Jake adapted his approach to work within alien systems. "This changes everything," Queen Zephyra said, but her voice was uncertain now. "If word of this spreads throughout my empire, other dragons might begin to question their conditioning." "Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing," Jake said, still focused on his equipment readings. Queen Zephyra stared at him in shock. "You have no idea what you are suggesting. The draconic hegemony maintains order across hundreds of star systems. Without absolute control over our enforcers, chaos would consume the galaxy." "Whose chaos?" Korath asked quietly. "Yours or ours?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time in his long servitude, Korath was thinking about the consequences of his actions instead of simply following orders. The neural implants that had once dominated his thoughts now felt like chains he might be able to break. Dr. Cross stepped forward carefully. "Your Majesty, perhaps we could discuss this situation more formally. Our respective governments might benefit from understanding what has happened here." "There is nothing to discuss," Queen Zephyra said, but her usual commanding tone was gone. "Korath will return to normal function once I have him properly recalibrated." "What if he doesn't want to be recalibrated?" Jake asked the simple question. Shattered the last of Queen Zephia's composure. "What?" She screamed. "Dragons do not want things. They serve. They obey. They fight when commanded and die when ordered. That is their purpose." Korath stood up slowly, his massive frame filling the room. "I remember wanting things," he said, his voice heavy with centuries of suppressed memories. "I remember choosing my own path, before the implants, before the conditioning. I remember being free." "Impossible," Queen Zephyra said, but her voice was weak now. "You have served me faithfully for 800 years. I have been your slave for 800. Years, Korath corrected. "There is a difference." Captain Rodriguez made a quick decision. "Dr. Cross, escort Her Majesty to guest quarters." "Comfortable quarters," she added, seeing the Queen's expression. "Jake, I need you to come with me. We have a situation to discuss." As they left the engineering bay, Jake looked back at Korath. "You going to be okay?" The dragon nodded slowly. "I think so. For the first time in centuries, I think I will be okay." An hour later, Jake sat in Captain Rodriguez's office, trying to explain what had happened. "I don't really understand it myself," he said. "I just saw that he was hurting and tried to help. And now we have a dragon who's questioning his loyalty to his queen," Captain Rodriguez said. "Do you realize what this could mean? That maybe dragons and humans don't have to be enemies?" Jake suggested. Captain Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. "Jake, you might have just started a revolution. If other dragons learn that they can choose not to obey their rulers, the entire power structure of the draconic hegemony could collapse. Is that a bad thing?" Jake asked before Captain Rodriguez could answer. Alarms started blaring throughout the station. Dr. Cross's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, we have multiple draconic ships approaching. It looks like Queen Zephyra called for reinforcements." Before she came aboard, Captain Rodriguez stood up quickly. "How many ships?" 12 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought, Dr. Cross reported. "They're demanding we surrender Korath and Jake immediately." Jake looked out the window at the approaching alien fleet. Each ship was the size of a city, bristling with weapons that could destroy the human station in minutes. "Guess they're not happy about their dragon making his own choices," he said. "Jake," Captain Rodriguez said seriously, "I need to ask you something. Can you do for other dragons what you did for Korath?" Jake thought about it. "Maybe, if they're biomechanical. Systems work the same way. and if they want to be helped. That's a big if, Captain Rodriguez said. Yeah, Jake agreed. But it might be the only chance we have. Through the station's corridors, they could hear Korath's heavy footsteps as the dragon moved toward the docking bay. His voice echoed through the halls as he spoke to Queen Zephyra. I will not let them harm the human who helped me. For the first time in 800 years, I choose my own path. Queen Zephyra's reply was too quiet to hear, but her tone carried the weight of absolute fury. The most powerful ruler in the galaxy was learning that some things could not be controlled through force alone. Jake picked up his tools and headed for the door. Guess I better go see if I can help some more dragons, he said. Captain Rodriguez watched him go, wondering if she was witnessing the beginning of a new age or the end of human civilization. Either way, it was going to be interesting. The draconic fleet surrounded the human station like wolves circling wounded prey. 12 massive ships bristled with weapons, their hulls covered in the same biomechanical technology that Jake had seen on Korath. At the center of the formation, a dreadnought the size of a small moon waited with the patience of something that had never been defeated. Jake stood in the station's main docking bay, watching through the transparent aluminum windows as dragon fighters swarmed between the larger ships. Each fighter was piloted by a dragon, their minds controlled by the same neural implants that had once dominated Korath. They're demanding we surrender you and Korath, Captain Rodriguez said, reading from a communication device. Queen Zephyra says you've committed an act of war by corrupting her enforcer. Korath stood beside Jake, his massive form radiating calm despite the threat outside. The dragon had spent the last few hours exploring the station, speaking with humans and remembering what it felt like to make his own choices. For the first time in centuries, his thoughts were his own. I will not surrender, Korath said simply. I have been a slave long enough. Dr. Cross hurried into the docking bay, carrying a portable scanner. Jake, I've been studying the readings from when you helped Korath. The biomechanical implants don't just control behavior, they actually suppress the dragon's natural telepathic abilities. Telepathic? Jake asked. All dragons can communicate with each other through thought, Korath explained. But the implants block this ability to prevent us from coordinating resistance. Queen Zephyra learned long ago that isolated dragons are easier to control. Jake looked out at the fleet surrounding them. So all those dragon pilots out there can't talk to each other? Not directly, Korath said. They receive orders through the implants, but they cannot share their own thoughts or feelings. An idea began forming in Jake's mind. What if we could change that? Dr. Cross looked up from his scanner readings. You mean disrupt their neural implants like you did with Korath? Maybe, Jake said. But we'd need a way to broadcast the signal to all of them at once. Captain Rodriguez shook her head. Jake, even if that's possible, we're talking about freeing hundreds of dragons all at the same time. That could cause massive chaos. The chaos is already here, Korath said, gesturing toward the fleet. The question is whether it will be the chaos of war or the chaos of freedom. Before anyone could respond, Queen Zephyra entered the docking bay flanked by 2 guards. Her silver and gold scales seemed to glow with inner fire, and her eyes held the cold fury of a ruler who had never been defied. Korath, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. You will return to my ship immediately for recalibration. This human contamination will be purged from your systems. No, Korath said calmly. Queen Zephyra's eyes widened. In 1,000 years of rule, no dragon had ever refused her direct command. You forget yourself, enforcer. I made you what you are. I can unmake you just as easily. You made me into a weapon, Korath replied. But I was something else before that. I was free. Queen Zephyra activated a device on her wrist, and Korath suddenly stiffened in pain. The neural implants in his skull were receiving a punishment signal, designed to cause agony until he submitted to her will. Jake saw Korath's distress and immediately went to the nearest control panel. His fingers flew over the controls, adjusting the station's power grid to generate a counterfrequency. Within seconds, the pain signals were disrupted, and Korath stood straight again. Impossible, Queen Zephyra breathed. No one can interfere with draconic neural technology. Jake can, Dr. Cross said with admiration. He doesn't try to understand your technology the way we do. He just figures out what it's trying to accomplish and finds a way to help or hinder it. Jake was already working on something else. Dr. Cross, can you boost the station's communication array? I want to try something. What are you thinking? Captain Rodriguez asked. If the neural implants work on the same frequency patterns as Korath's did, maybe I can broadcast a disruption signal to the entire fleet, Jake explained. Give all those dragons a chance to think for themselves. Queen Zephyra backed away in horror. You cannot. The consequences would be catastrophic. Dragons without control will turn on each other, on their crews, on everyone around them. Or maybe they'll just choose to stop fighting, Jake said. You don't understand, Queen Zephyra said desperately. Dragons are predators. Without the implants to control their instincts, they will kill everything in sight. Korath made a sound that might have been laughter. Is that what you tell yourself to justify enslaving us? We are not animals, Zephyra. We are people who have been forced to forget our own nature. Dr. Cross finished his modifications to the communication array. Jake, the system is ready. But I have to warn you, if this goes wrong, we could trigger a battle that destroys both fleets. Jake looked around the docking bay at the faces watching him. Captain Rodriguez wore the expression of a soldier preparing for the worst. Dr. Cross showed the excitement of a scientist witnessing a historic moment. Queen Zephyra radiated desperate fury, and Korath looked hopeful for the first time in centuries. Sometimes you have to break something to fix it, Jake said, and activated the broadcast. The signal spread out from the station in all directions, a complex wave of frequencies designed to disrupt neural control systems. It reached the nearest dragon fighters first, then spread to the larger ships, and finally touched the massive dreadnought at the center of the formation. The effect was immediate and chaotic. Fighter craft began breaking formation as their pilots experienced moments of clarity. Some dragons turned their weapons on their own ships, attacking the control systems that had enslaved them. Others simply stopped fighting and hung motionless in space, overwhelmed by the sudden return of free will. On the larger ships, dragons turned on their handlers. Centuries of suppressed rage erupted as former slaves realized what had been done to them. But the violence was not random or mindless. The dragons were methodical, targeting the control systems and neural interface equipment while leaving the ship crews mostly unharmed. They're not killing everyone, Dr. Cross observed with amazement. They're liberating themselves. Queen Zephyra watched her fleet dissolve into chaos and fell to her knees. My empire, she whispered. 1,000 years of order, destroyed by a human who fixes machines. Order built on slavery isn't really order, Jake said gently. It's just delayed chaos. The largest ship in the fleet, a heavy cruiser called the Iron Talon, broke away from the formation and approached the station. Its communication systems crackled to life, and a dragon's voice filled the docking bay. This is Vexther, formerly of Queen Zephyra's Third Fleet. I speak for myself and 47 other liberated dragons aboard this vessel. We request permission to dock and speak with the human who freed us. Captain Rodriguez looked at Jake. Your call, she said. Let them come, Jake said. But maybe we should meet somewhere bigger than the docking bay. An hour later, The station's main cargo hold had been converted into an impromptu meeting hall. Dragons of various sizes and colorations filled the space, their scales showing the full spectrum of their species' diversity. Some still bore the scars of their biomechanical modifications, while others had already begun removing the hated devices. Vexther, a dragon with deep blue scales and intelligent green eyes, stepped forward to speak. "Human Jake Morrison," he said formally, "you have given us something we thought lost forever. The ability to choose our own paths." "I just fixed some broken equipment," Jake said. "You did the hard part." "The hard part?" Vexther asked. "Choosing. To be free," Jake explained. "That's not something I can do for you. That's something you have to do for yourselves." Queen Zephyra stood in the corner, guarded but not restrained. She watched the proceedings with the hollow eyes of someone who had lost everything. "You have doomed the galaxy," she said quietly. "Without the hegemony to maintain order, chaos will consume everything." "Maybe," Korath said, moving to stand beside Jake. "Or maybe we will build something better." Another dragon, smaller than the others with silver scales, stepped forward. Nervously, "I am Kessara. I have served as a fighter pilot for 300 years. I remember having a name before the implants, but I cannot remember what it was." "Then choose a new one," Jake suggested. "You're free now. You can be whoever you want." "To be?" Kessara considered this for a long moment. "I think I would like to explore, to see planets that are not burning, to meet people who are not afraid of me." "That sounds like a good start," Jake said. Dr. Cross stepped forward with his scanner. "If I may, I'd like to study the neural implant technology. Not to rebuild it," he added quickly, seeing the dragon's expressions, "but to develop better ways to remove the remaining devices safely." "We would appreciate that," Vexther said. "Some of us have carried these implants for so long that removal will be difficult." Captain Rodriguez cleared her throat. "We need to discuss what happens next. You're all welcome to stay here while you decide what to do, but eventually you'll need to make some choices about your future. Some of us wish to return to our home worlds," Vexther said. "Others want to explore the galaxy. And some," he looked at Korath, "may choose to stay and help other dragons find their freedom. There are still thousands of dragons." News of the dragon liberation spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The Draconic Hegemony's own communication networks, designed to carry orders from Queen Zephyra to her scattered forces, now carried something far more dangerous. Hope.Jake sat in the engineering bay of the research station, surrounded by parts from draconic neural implants. Dr. Cross had removed the devices from dozens of dragons over the past week, and Jake was studying them like broken engines, trying to understand how they worked so he could build better ways to defeat them. "The frequency patterns are more complex than I thought," Jake said, holding up a small crystalline component. "Each implant is tuned to a specific dragon's brain waves. That's why Queen Zephyra could control them so precisely." Korath lay nearby, his massive form relaxed as Dr. Cross performed the final surgery to remove his neural implants. The dragon had insisted on staying conscious during the procedure, wanting to experience every moment of his complete liberation. "How does it feel?" Jake asked as Dr. Cross extracted the last device from Korath's skull. "Like waking up from a very long dream," Korath said, his voice filled with wonder. "I can hear them, Jake. I can hear other dragons thinking across the galaxy." "The liberated ones?" Dr. Cross asked, sealing the surgical site. "All of them," Korath said. "The free and the enslaved. The neural implants blocked our telepathic abilities, but they could not destroy them completely. Now I can sense the awakening happening everywhere." Captain Rodriguez entered the bay carrying a datapad filled with reports. "Jake, you need to see this. We're getting communications from 43 star systems where dragons have broken free from their controllers. But we're also getting distress calls from planets where the liberation is causing chaos. Jake frowned. What kind of chaos? Mixed results, Captain Rodriguez said. On some worlds, the dragons are working with local populations to overthrow hegemony governors. But on others, confused dragons are lashing out at everyone around them. Centuries of conditioning don't disappear overnight. We need to help them, Jake said immediately. If dragons don't understand what's happening to them, they might hurt people who don't deserve it. How? Captain Rodriguez asked. We can't be everywhere at once. Korath lifted his great head. We can teach others what Jake taught me. Not just how to disable the implants, but how to help confused dragons adjust to freedom. Dr. Cross looked up from his medical instruments. That could work. If we can train teams of humans and liberated dragons to work together, they could travel to systems where help is needed. What about the hegemony's response? Captain Rodriguez asked. Queen Zephyra's remaining forces won't just let us spread revolution throughout their empire. As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The communication officer's voice echoed through the halls. Captain, we have multiple hegemony ships approaching. Different signatures from the ones we've seen before. In the main command center, the tactical display showed a fleet of sleek, silver ships unlike the biomechanical vessels of the regular draconic forces. These ships moved with cold precision, their hulls unmarked by the organic curves that characterized normal hegemony technology. Queen Zephyra's personal guard, Korath said, his voice grim. The silent fleet. They serve her directly, and their dragons have additional conditioning beyond normal neural implants. Additional conditioning? Jake asked. Pain conditioning. Korath explained. Their implants don't just control behavior, they make disobedience physically agonizing. Even if we disrupt the control signals, these dragons may be too damaged to break free. The lead ship of the silent fleet opened a communication channel. Queen Zephyra's face appeared on the main screen, but she looked different now. Her scales were dull, her eyes hollow with exhaustion and rage. Human, she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute desperation. You have destroyed everything I spent millennia building. Entire sectors of my empire are in chaos. Dragons are turning against their handlers. Planets are rebelling, and order is collapsing everywhere your influence spreads. Jake stepped forward to face the screen. Your Majesty, maybe this is a chance to build something better. Something that doesn't require enslaving entire species. Queen Zephyra's laugh was bitter and cold. Better? Do you see what your freedom has brought? 3 star systems are at war as different dragon factions fight for territory. 2 planets have been abandoned as their dragon protectors simply flew away. Billions of beings who depended on hegemony stability are now facing starvation and chaos. Growing pains, Korath said, moving into view of the camera. Freedom is messy at first, but it is still better than slavery. You are never slaves, Queen Zephyra snapped. You were partners in building the greatest empire the galaxy has ever known. Partners don't need neural implants to ensure loyalty. Korath replied calmly. Captain Rodriguez joined the conversation. Your Majesty, what do you want from us? I want you to undo what you have done, Queen Zephyra said. Help me restore order to my empire, and I will ensure that humanity is treated as an honored ally rather than a conquered species. And if we refuse? Captain Rodriguez asked. Queen Zephyra's expression hardened. Then I will use my silent fleet to destroy every liberated dragon in the galaxy, starting with Korath. The dragons of the silent fleet cannot be turned against me. Their conditioning is absolute. The communication ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Through the windows, they could see the silent fleet maintaining perfect formation, waiting for orders. She's not bluffing, Korath said quietly. The silent fleet dragons have been conditioned from birth to serve without question. Their neural implants are integrated so deeply that removing them would likely kill them. So what do we do? Dr. Cross asked. Jake was already thinking, his mind working through the problem like a complex mechanical puzzle. Dr. Cross, when you removed Koraith's implants, did you notice anything unusual about their power source? They were drawing energy from his own bioelectric field, Dr. Cross said. Self-sustaining once installed. What if we reverse the process? Jake asked. Instead of drawing energy from the dragon, what if we fed energy back into the implants? That could overload the entire system, Dr. Cross said with growing excitement. But the feedback might damage the dragon's nervous system. Not if we do it carefully, Jake said. Like jump-starting a dead battery. Give it just enough power to reset the control programs without frying the hardware. Korath considered this. It is dangerous, but it might work. The silent fleet dragons have suffered for so long that even a small chance of freedom would be worth the risk. We'd need to get close enough to broadcast the signal, Captain Rodriguez said. And the silent fleet won't just let us approach peacefully. Leave that to me, Korath said. I still remember the protocols for communicating with Silent Fleet. Dragons. It will allow me to approach if I claim to be carrying out Queen Zephyra's orders. 2 hours later, Korath piloted a small shuttle toward the Silent Fleet flagship. Jake sat beside him, portable equipment designed to generate the feedback signal stowed in the cargo bay. They had tested the device on some of the implant fragments. Dr. Cross had removed, but there was no way to know if it would work on living subjects. Silent Fleet Command, this is Korath. The dragon spoke into the communication system. I am carrying out a direct order from Queen Zephyra to inspect your neural control systems for signs of human contamination. The reply came in a voice so flat and emotionless, it barely sounded alive. Acknowledged, Korath. You are cleared to dock with the command vessel Absolute Authority. As their shuttle entered the flagship's docking bay, Jake saw rows of Silent Fleet dragons standing at perfect attention. Each one was identical in posture and expression, their individuality erased by decades of conditioning. Remember, Korath whispered, these dragons may attack us the moment they sense what we're trying to do. Their conditioning makes them view any threat to the neural implants as a threat to their own existence. Jake activated his equipment, and the feedback signal began broadcasting at low power. The nearest dragon stiffened slightly, confusion flickering across his features for just a moment before the implants reasserted control. It's working, Jake said, but the signal isn't strong enough to overcome their conditioning completely. Then, we need to get closer to the main neural control center, Korath said. Every ship in the Silent Fleet has a central processing unit that coordinates all the individual implants. They made their way through the ship's corridors, passing more dragons frozen in mechanical perfection. Jake increased the power of his signal gradually, hoping to avoid triggering the ship's security system's dot in the control center. They found the neural processing unit, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with dark energy. Dozens of cables connected it to communication arrays throughout the ship, creating a network that linked every dragon in the fleet to Queen Zephyra's will. If I overload this system, it will affect every dragon in the fleet simultaneously, Jake said. But the feedback could kill them if I get it wrong. Freedom always involves risk, Korath said. But slavery is a certainty of death, just a slower one. Jake connected his equipment to the processing unit and began his work. Almost immediately, alarms started blaring through. Queen Zephyra stood alone on the bridge of her personal dreadnought, watching her empire crumble through the massive viewing window. Every few minutes, another ship would break away from her fleet as its dragon crew chose freedom over service. Her hands trembled as she activated the neural enhancement, implants buried deep in her own skull. The implants had been her secret for centuries, amplifying her natural psychic abilities, until she could dominate the minds of entire star systems. Now, as her power slipped away, she prepared to use them one final time. If she could not rule the galaxy, she would drag it into chaos with her. Back on the research station, Jake worked frantically to modify his equipment. The liberation of the Silent Fleet had given him new insights into draconic neural technology. But Queen Zephyra's personal implants were far more advanced than anything he had encountered. She's drawing power from the psychic field of every dragon she's ever controlled, Dr. Cross explained, reading from his instruments. Even the liberated ones are still connected to her through quantum entanglement. If she overloads her implants, the feedback could kill thousands of dragons across the galaxy. Koroth paced the engineering bay, his massive form radiating anxiety. There must be a way to break the connection safely. Jake, you have solved every other problem we've faced. This one's different, Jake said, staring at the complex patterns on his scanner. I'm not dealing with a machine that needs fixing. I'm dealing with a person who's lost everything and doesn't see any reason to stop destroying things. Captain Rodriguez entered the bay carrying urgent reports. Jake, we're receiving distress calls from across the galaxy. Queen Zephyra is using her psychic powers to force dragons to attack their own liberation forces. She's turning them against each other. She's making them choose between freedom and the safety of their friends, Korath said with understanding. It's a cruel strategy, but effective. Jake looked around at the faces surrounding him. These people were depending on him to find a solution, but for the first time since this crisis began, he felt truly lost. Every other problem had been about fixing broken machines or helping trapped beings. This was about healing a broken soul, and Jake had no tools for that kind of repair. What if we're approaching this wrong? He said suddenly. What if instead of trying to stop Queen Zephyra, we try to help her? Help her? Dr. Cross asked in confusion. She's trying to destroy half the galaxy, because she thinks it's the only option left, Jake said. But what if we could show her another way? Korath tilted his massive head thoughtfully. You want to communicate with her directly, through the psychic link. More than that, Jake said, his idea taking shape. I want to show her what the dragons are building with their freedom. Not chaos and destruction, but something better than her empire ever was. The psychic feedback could kill you, Dr. Cross warned. Human minds aren't designed to interface with draconic neural networks. Then we modify the interface, Jake said, already sketching designs on his portable workpad. Use the same harmonic principles that let me communicate with Korath. Instead of fighting the alien technology, we work with it. An hour later, Jake sat in a chair surrounded by jury-rigged equipment, cables connecting his head to a modified draconic neural interface. The device hummed with the same frequency patterns he had used to liberate the dragons, but now those patterns were focused inward, preparing to link his human consciousness to the vast psychic network that Queen Zephyra controlled. Are you sure about this? Captain Rodriguez asked for the 10th time. No, Jake said honestly, but I'm sure about doing nothing. If Queen Zephyra succeeds in her plan, millions of beings will die. If this kills me but saves them, that's still a win. Korath placed one massive claw gently on Jake's shoulder. I will be with you in the link. My telepathic abilities can guide you through the network and help protect your mind from the worst feedback. Thanks, Jake said. Ready when you are. Dr. Cross activated the interface, and Jake felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his own skull. Suddenly, he was connected to hundreds of dragons across the galaxy, feeling their confusion, their joy, their fear, and their hope all at once. The center of the network, Queen Zephyra's presence burned like a dying star. Her rage and despair filled the psychic space with destructive energy. But underneath those emotions, Jake sensed something else. Loneliness. Your Majesty, Jake said, his voice echoing through the telepathic link. You, Queen Zephyra's psychic, scream threatened to shatter his consciousness. You have taken everything from me. My dragons, my empire, my purpose. What more do you want? I want to show you something, Jake said, drawing on Korath's strength to maintain his mental stability. Look at what your dragons are building. Through the neural network, Jake projected images of the liberated dragons. He showed Queen Zephyra, the former Silent Fleet Commander Zexial, working with human engineers to design new space habitats. He showed her Vexther leading a team of mixed species in providing aid to war-torn planets. He showed her hundreds of dragons choosing cooperation over conquest, building instead of destroying. Illusions, Queen Zephyra said, but her voice held less certainty than before. No, Jake said. Truth. This is what happens when beings are free to choose their own path. They don't all choose chaos. Most of them choose to build something better. I gave them order, Queen Zephyra insisted. I gave them purpose. I gave them an empire that spanned the galaxy. You gave them slavery, Korath's voice joined the link. But they have given themselves something far more valuable. They have given themselves hope. Jake felt Queen Zephyra's psychic barriers beginning to weaken. Centuries of isolation and absolute power had left her unable to see beyond her own perspective, but the direct connection was forcing her to experience the emotions and thoughts of her former subjects. Feel what they feel, Jake urged. See what they see. This is what freedom looks like. For the first time in over 1,000 years, Queen Zephyra truly listened to her dragons instead of commanding them. She felt their relief at being free from the neural implants. She experienced their joy at rediscovering their own identities. She shared their excitement as they planned new lives built on choice rather than compulsion. They ... They are not afraid, she whispered in amazement. Why should they be afraid? Jake asked. They have each other. They have hope. They have the chance to become whatever they choose to be. But the chaos, Queen Zephyra said weakly. The violence, the disorder. Some chaos, yes, Jake admitted. Freedom is messy. But look closer. See how they're helping each other through the confusion. See how they're building new communities based on cooperation instead of domination. Through the link, Queen Zephyra watched former enemies working together to solve problems. She saw dragons who had been conditioned to hate each other, sharing resources and knowledge. She witnessed the birth of something entirely new, a galactic community based on choice rather than force. I don't understand, she said, and for the first time her voice sounded vulnerable instead of commanding. How can beings work together without someone controlling them? The same way you and I are working together right now, Jake said. We choose to. That's what makes it real. The destructive energy that had been building in Queen Zephyra's neural implants began to dissipate, instead of overloading the network. With chaos, she found herself channeling power into something constructive, a galaxy-wide communication system that would allow all beings to speak freely with each other. What happens to me now? Queen Zephyra asked. I have no empire, no dragons to command, no purpose. You have the same thing everyone else has, Jake said gently. You have the chance to choose what comes next. I don't know how to choose, Queen Zephyra admitted. I have been a ruler for so long that I have forgotten how to be anything else. Then learn, Korath said. We all have to learn. That's what makes us free. The psychic link began to fade as Jake's human mind reached its limits. But before the connection broke completely, he felt something unexpected from Queen Zephyra. Gratitude. Thank you, she said quietly, for showing me that there was another way. Jake opened his eyes back in the engineering bay, surrounded by concerned faces. Did it work? Captain Rodriguez asked Dot before Jake could answer, the communication system crackled to life. Queen Zephyra's voice filled the room, but it sounded different now. Smaller, more uncertain, but also more genuine. "This is Zephyra, former queen of the Draconic Hegemony," she said. "I am hereby dissolving the Empire and releasing all remaining dragons from their neural conditioning. I ask forgiveness from those I have wronged, and I offer what assistance I can in building whatever comes next." 6 months later, Jake stood in his workshop aboard a new space station, one designed and built by a coalition of humans, dragons, and dozens of other species that had been freed from hegemony control. His workbench held an interesting mix of human tools and draconic technology, and he was working on a project that would have been impossible under the old empire. A joint exploration vessel designed to seek out new civilizations and offer them friendship instead of conquest. Korath entered the workshop, moving carefully to avoid bumping the equipment with his massive frame. "Jake, we have received another message from the Outer Rim. A species called the Vorthen has